Okay, we're here in the Carl Park, which is an 8.3 acre park that was donated to the city of Urbana in 1909. And I am here with a local poet.
Hi, my name's Ann Hart, and I am a local poet.
Very good. Ann, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you came to be a poet.
I began writing, I think like many poets do, when I was very young, and then probably wrote what many young poets do, things about boys and breakups and things like that, and then stopped for a long, long, long time. Had an adult life, had children, grew them up, and started writing again maybe 8 years ago, and then found the local poetry community, which really got me going again.
Okay. Do you find that your poetry has changed over the last couple of years that you've been working on it?
Oh, definitely. I think in the beginning I didn't think about things like form and rhythm and rhyme and sound as much as I do now. In the beginning, a lot of it was just pouring out what was inside and trying to find a way to say that made sense and felt good to me. Now that I know more about things like form, I enjoy those challenges and spend more time thinking about that part of poetry, how to still have those same feelings and that important part of me coming to the page, but at the same time finding ways to craft it that are interesting to me and appealing, hopefully, to readers.
What kinds of things do you look for when you're working with a poem?
I'm not good at iambic pentameter for sure, so that part of the more formal forms I have a little trouble with, though I try to write in those sometimes because I do find them a challenge. I like the way things sound. It's hard to plan that. It's when I start writing, I might hear the sounds and how they work together and make changes, but sometimes, I don't know, it's like it comes out in a way that sounds, maybe it's because I've been speaking my whole life or almost. So, I know what those sounds are supposed to sound like and how they're supposed to work together.
Could you work us through a little bit of that process? Maybe you have a poem with you that you could use to explain how that works for you?
How that works for me? Oh boy, you got me with that one. Okay, so this is probably the most recent poem I've put together, and this was actually inspired by the Iron Post here in Urbana, just a couple of miles from here. It's called "The Fates Make Me Miss the Silence." And it begins, "Time puts me in a place of soft jazz and bottle green light. A black and white film runs soundlessly over the bar. I'm surprised at the change from sports or game shows with bow-tied hosts, grinning contestants, and a laugh track to invite us into the false reality. What am I doing here? Last night I dreamed dinosaurs sunned themselves in my yard with the cats. Jay says, we raise our vibrations to match the physical. She's right, of course, but some days I feel like Mercury beating across the bathroom floor effortlessly, sinuous, looking for bottomless cracks in the aging linoleum, hoping the silver shears will cut the thread and let me fall." One time before Poets at the Post, there was jazz. And I was sitting there thinking, am I here on the wrong night? And so that sort of awkwardness is what inspired the poem of wondering if I was in the right place. But the sounds actually came from someone else's poem that I quote. Another poet in the area said in one of her works, "We raise our vibrations to match the physical." And I thought, what does that mean, and how does that sound in a poem or in one of my poems? So it sort of built from there. And then the strange dream about the dinosaurs and the cats again. But one of my favorite parts of my own work is when I talk about the Mercury. Mercury beating across the bathroom floor, effortlessly sinuous, looking for bottomless cracks in the aging linoleum. And when I first wrote that, it was Mercury flowing across the bathroom floor, and several people suggested beating because of how Mercury moves. And I think I spent some time with the thesaurus to find sinuous because I couldn't quite find the word about how Mercury moves that also made the sound. And I like the sound of sinuous with bottomless and Mercury and effortlessly, which I can't seem to say out loud. So I just like the way the sounds sort of come together with the images and then the idea of the fates affecting that. So.
And do you consider writing poetry to be more of a practice, sort of a spiritual kind of thing, or more of a craft, a working kind of thing, an act of labor?
Well, for me, it's both. So there's the spiritual, the inspiration that comes, that gives me the idea. Like in that poem, sitting there at the post and thinking, wait, am I here on the wrong night? You know, what's going on? And then, but the work of it is part of it too, because the inspiration, the first thing that ends up on the paper is what I want to say, but it doesn't always make sense when you read it, right? Or wouldn't make sense to a reader. And it's not that I want to write completely to a reader, but I am my first reader. It has to make sense to me. If I were to put this away, pull it out in a year, would it still make sense to me? So I have to put in that time, the sweat of it, you know, the crafting of it, for it to really say what I want it to say and continue in the future to say that and make sense to me. I do sometimes sit down and just do the work, right? And for the practice, I think it's important to build my skills, and I've done that with things like forms, and I might take a sonnet or another kind of form and try to build something. A lot of times that doesn't go anywhere beyond my practice paper and me just working on it, but it may inspire something else in the future or make me feel stronger in my use of words and sounds and rhythms.
How do you know when it's ready to go out to the world?
Oh, I'm really bad about that. I'm really uncomfortable sending my babies out into the world. It was easier to have my children grow up and go to college than it is to put one of my poems out. You know, I had a poem show up in this book, and that was really neat, but most poetry, it seems like, at least at someone of my sort of amateur level, ends up on the internet. And to me, it's almost non-existent. It's just so in the air, and the website it's on disappears, and is it even really a part of the world anymore? So that's just kind of an interesting concept to think about, is where do these poems actually end up if they're not on
But
paper
you have
somewhere.
a poem in this book. Would you like to read it for us?
Sure. This poem was inspired by something that my husband and I inherited from his grandmother, and also from experiences of my childhood. So this is from a couple of years ago. But anyway, it's called Tomato Heirloom. When I was a child, I ate like a child. Every fish stick, chicken nugget, and French fry covered in tomatoes, pureed smooth, mixed with sugar, and forced into a squeezable bottle. When I was a child, I watched as my grandmother sliced beefsteak tomatoes, fresh from her garden, on an old wooden cutting board, and arranged the slices in neat rows on her best china plate. When I was a child, I wrinkled my nose in disgust as I watched my grandfather eat a salted tomato slice with a silver knife and fork, as though it were a costly fillet. The cutting board is now mine. The tomatoes are sliced for soup or salad or sauce, or put on a plate and sprinkled with salt, enjoyed with a knife and a fork, while the ketchup bottle stands forgotten in my refrigerator.
Very nice.
Thank you.
How did you know that was good enough to go out? Did you have some sense or some thing you're looking at in the poem that would tell you that?
It just felt right. It felt finished. It felt like there was no more of that story to tell. It was done, it was complete, and off it went.
So you say this poem is finished. Are there poems you've ever abandoned because you had nothing else to give them, or
oh yeah,
no place else to go?
There's lots of them. Some of them have gone out to see if anybody else has any ideas. A lot of them are just in a drawer or in a computer file at this point.
And do you have a favorite poet that you like to read over and over again, or someone that you look to for inspiration?
Right now I'm reading a lot of Margaret Atwood. I really like her poetry. I like the fact that even though that she can put an interesting twist and meaning in a poem, she can also include a lot of fantasy and fun in her work. And it doesn't seem to be all about her own personal experience. She can look at the wider world and write a poem about a vampire or a werewolf or something like that, and tell us something about the world in that. And I find that really inspiring.
Do you see that in your own work sometimes?
Sometimes. I've written a few things that have absolutely nothing to do with me, that I hope tell us something about the world, or at least how I see it, that are a little strange and a little funny, which is how I find some of her work.
Do you have something like that with you can read to us?
Sure. I wrote a poem called 30 Years in a Bad Marriage that I always preface by saying I have a very good marriage, and my husband is alive and well. So this isn't very complimentary, but it's called 30 Years in a Bad Marriage. White skin above a green collar, below a summer's tan, below graying hair cut short, for convenience, for control. A small white bump, nooked like an oyster, the top of his spine, neurons meet bone, meet flesh, meet life. She sees that joint as he bends over soup, wordlessly eating, his back blank. She turns away, debones the chicken. First the legs and the thighs, moving up, moving meat. Her knife work brisk, certain in practiced hands. Cuts into breasts, then the wings. Her mind drifts to better times, early days, recalls caresses, surprise kisses on her nape. Removes the neck, makes a notch, remembers slights, remembers unexplained late work nights, remembers lipstick that wasn't hers, removes the heart, removes the rib, remembers shoves, remembers jokes, feels the heft of the knife in her hand, thinks of the long sleeve shirt she wore that summer, the excuses, the sunglasses, removes the spine, remembers the steel, feels the grip, remembers his back turned, remembers his back is turned. So a little gruesome, but nothing real in there.
But I can see the Atwoodian sort of feel to the end of it. But let me ask you, the question is always, how much of the poet is in the poem? Certainly you're not about to kill your beloved husband, but I feel like there's something of you in that character.
For me, I think there are elements in my poetry of me. Of course, so much of it's unavoidable, but I don't write a lot about myself. And actually, that's something I'm trying to do more recently. It's something I've avoided, to expose myself like that, and I think it's something I'm feeling more comfortable with as I become more competent as a poet and more comfortable with the writing process. But it's unavoidable that a certain amount of us is in all of our work. I can't debone a chicken. I really wouldn't want to. My husband and I have a healthy relationship, but we have been married just over 30 years, so it was a place to sort of create the setting for this gruesome little story.
And do you show your poems to people as you're writing them?
I do. I'm a part of a couple of different writing groups that meet here in the Champaign-Urbana area. I think it's helpful for me. I know it's not helpful for everyone, but for me it's helpful to have other people look at them, and they help me think about my poems in different ways. So I may not change much, or I may not take someone else's suggestion, but I'll look at my poem in a fresh way, which might give me new ideas or solidify the ideas that I have and make me feel comfortable keeping them.
And is there a poem of yours that you'd like to see on your headstone?
On my headstone? Oh, you should have warned me about that one. I don't think so, not yet. Yeah, I'll have to work on my...
Well, there's something to do now.
Yeah, what's going to be on there? And how long can it be? How much does it cost per letter to chisel those in? I'll have to think about that.
Yes. Well, thank you, Ann, very much for your commentary.
It was great being here.